shift a little bit towards sort of the political environment.
Yes.
Again, President Obama in his speech talked about, briefly, but he did talk about the need for a market-based cap and trade system, basically, to help address this climate change. So we had the stimulus package that is going to help invest in some of the green technologies and companies to sort of help create jobs in the United States. But now we have a policy change and a policy challenge. Can you talk a little bit about the specifics of what EDF supports? Well, let's start that.
The reason we support cap and trade is that we feel that policy design will make it the most economically efficient way of reducing our greenhouse gases. Because what it means is there's really an incentive for people that have very cost-effective ways to reduce their emissions to do so, because they can sometimes sell credits into the market. And in other cases, we feel like it will help companies plan as to when they're going to make investments in some of these new technologies that will reduce things, because it gives them some flexibility. I think from a business standpoint, a cap is incredibly important to amplify the stimulus, because it is a long-term policy tool. And when you are financing new projects, large new projects, like wind and solar and other things, you need to know that you're going to have consistent policy. You need policy that's going to be there for the next decade or two. If you do a cap, it creates a demand for all of those, because they're all equal. They're all reducing greenhouse gases. And so you get the economic opportunity and the jobs inherent in all of those solutions. If you do other policy tools, which you can certainly do in complement a cap, like a renewable portfolio standard, those are going to capture part of that economic opportunity, but not all of it. So we really want to make sure that whatever else we're doing, whether it's a renewable portfolio standard or other policy tools, we also do the cap, because it's the only one that both gets us to the levels we want to make sure we get to scientifically, and it's the only one that really captures the most economic opportunity for our country and the most jobs.
Sure. I want to back up really briefly and just make sure that we all know what cap and trade means. So cap and trade, cap simply means there is a ceiling, there's a limit legally in terms of how much emissions a company can produce. And the policy is that they have credits each company is given a credit. If they are emitting lower than that standard, they can then sell off the sort of difference in terms of the amount of emissions or percentage of emissions they're allowed to produce, to other companies. So they're benefiting economically by selling that. Other companies are paying. They're feeling pain by virtue of that. Is that sort of an accurate layman's way of describing it?
I think that's a very good layman's way of describing it.
Okay, and the renewable energy portfolio, can you describe that briefly?
Yes, there have been state efforts to actually mandate that a certain percentage of electricity in a state has to come from renewable sources.
So California has done that, for example.
Yes, California. Actually now about, it's over 20 states that have done this. So it's definitely, it's definitely spreading around and so on. But, we love renewables. It's a great climate solution. But we have to make sure that we get to the levels the scientists tell us we need to get to. And so we've got to make sure, we believe, that we've got a cap on emissions, first and foremost. It is fully anticipated that the reductions would be required from really large energy-intensive industries. This isn't, mom and pop stores. This isn't, really most small and medium-sized companies don't emit a lot. They really don't use, a huge amount of energy in some of these companies, that they're even going to be regulated. But what it does mean is, if I'm a utility and I'm regulated, I may find that actually the cheapest thing for me to do is give my customers rebates to insulate their homes, to put in new windows, to do the things that are really the low-hanging fruit. And that's where we see there's going to be a lot of demand for those kinds of solutions, and that there will be increased markets and increased customers for all of those companies.
Talk a little bit about the challenges and on the political front to getting a cap and trade system in place.
I think the big challenge is going to be the economic arguments. We are in very tough economic times, and there's no question that there's going to be a lot of pushback from people who say we can't afford to do this. And of course, I see this very differently. First of all, there have been models run trying to predict what the cost of this policy is going to be, as we always do with policies. And it's predicting, whichever model you look at, and their competing models are predicting a very small drag on GDP. We might get to a level of GDP in April that we would have otherwise gotten to in January, which to me is a very small insurance policy on the cost of inaction of climate change, which could be huge. But every time we predicted the cost of a new environmental regulation, we've been wrong, and it's always been much less expensive than what was predicted by industry and others. And what's really exciting to me about the area of global warming and greenhouse gases is we have done so little really to focus on this, that there's so much untapped opportunity. And so I believe that most of these businesses, when they really look at what they can do internally in terms of energy efficiency, whether you're a small company that just has never really thought about the fact that you leave your lights on 24/7, and maybe you ought to put switches in that time your lights. Maybe you ought to make sure that your heat is turned down overnight, also through a sensor. I mean, there's all these great new technologies that are going to give us smart grid and other ways to very easily manage your energy costs. Just being conscious of it, I think, will enable businesses from the very energy intensive ones to the small ones to make enough changes that even if some of our energy prices are going up, because of course we're trying to manage these greenhouse gases, our total costs aren't going to go up. I know in my own house, before we insulated, before we changed all the light bulbs and stuff, our energy costs were much higher than what they are today. And one of the most exciting things that I'm seeing happening is for a lot of these energy intensive industries, when you do energy efficiency, you often get a 5 or 6% return on investment, which in this day and age is pretty good.
That's pretty good.
Yeah. 3 years ago, not just 10 years ago, but 3 years ago, Wall Street would have said, you can't invest in those projects. Those aren't a good enough investment. I mean, we really want to see 10% return on investments. Well, that's changed. And not only that, but...
Right. Anything positive is good.
Anything positive is good. So all of a sudden, I think capital is going to flow to these projects where, people inside companies that wanted to do them before couldn't get the capital because they were told, well, you can't show me you've got a 10% return on that energy efficient investment. And the other thing we're seeing is in a few places, investors are actually saying, hey, we like that 5% return. We want to pay for this. So the companies themselves may not even have to put up the capital.
The last question I want to ask you is, how can Care2 members help?
Yes.
Care2 members, we are an active bunch. We like taking action to make a difference.
I think there's a couple ways. First of all, we really want to publicize the website. It's lesscarbonmorejobs.org. And we want to do that because we really want people to see where the economic opportunity is. These are all companies that could grow. We're not saying these are companies that are thriving today because, of course, we don't have this cap and trade policy in place. But these are all companies that could grow under a cap. We also want people to add to our website. If you know a company that should be on this website, they're somehow in the supply chain. These are not companies that are greening their businesses, which is also important. If a company is starting to do recycling, that's a great thing to do, and we track that other places. That's not what this website is about. If it's a company that's making parts, components, or making something that helps reduce energy, we want to know about that, and we've got a form on our website that you can send in the company names so that we can build out this whole website. This is very much, an expert-led community here, but we want people to add to it. And then, of course, we really need your support in writing senators, congressmen, and even contacting your governor and other officials, other folks to say, look, we see that what we're doing today isn't working, and we want a change, and we think that a cap is the right way to go, cap and trade, both to deal with climate change so that what we leave our children is not a planet in peril, but actually a planet that's healthy. And we also leave our kids a healthy economy because this is going to be a way that we can reinvest in manufacturing and really create a lot of jobs.
Very interesting. So we got some crowdsourcing action.
Yes.
We've got some advocacy and education and spreading the word, which Care2 members all do very well. Jackie Roberts, thanks for your time.